Dear readers and viewers, followers of our social media platforms, today we are honored to welcome a truly unique guest, a person well known beyond the ocean, Rabbi Yakov Shapiro. Rabbi Shapiro is an international rabbi, author, and scholar with more than 30 years of rabbinical experience, and he currently holds the title of Professor Emeritus. He has earned a prominent place within the anti-Zionist intellectual community through his extensive and original body of work examining the ideology of Zionism and its relationship to Judaism. After completing high school at the age of 16, Rabbi Shapiro devoted himself entirely to the study of religion, becoming a protege of some of the most respected rabbinic scholars within Orthodox Judaism. His areas of study include religious philosophy, analytic theology, the Talmud, halakha, and biblical exegesis. At the age of 19, he published his first book, a collection of original works presenting rabbinic principles for resolving complex and sensitive theological questions. Among his other publications are commentaries on Jewish laws governing land disputes, published in 2000, commentaries on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lusato's interpretation of God as a necessary being, as well as a collection of original biblical exegesis. His most recent work, The Empty Wagon, Zionism's Path from an Identity Crisis to Identity Theft, a treatise on the differences between idealism and Zionism, is considered the most comprehensive study on this subject and is regarded by many as a definitive work. Rabbi Shapiro is the recipient of numerous awards and honors, including the Community Leadership Award from Agudath Israel of America, the Keter Torah Award from Yeshiva Torah Vodath, the Harbatza Torah Award from Yeshiva Beis Yisrael, the Parent of the Year Award from Blossom Israel, as well as postdoctoral fellowships from the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture.
Thank you very much. I learned a new Russian word just now. Premier means award, right? As I could tell by the biography, you mentioned various awards with the names of the organizations. So I figured out that premier means award. So I learned a new Russian word so far. So it's great I'm here.
If I may ask, I have reviewed your pages and publications, and one central question has particularly interested me. In your commentaries, you often address the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and you explain that the Jewish people traditionally perceive Jerusalem as a sacred city rather than a political capital. In other words, the idea of Jerusalem as the political capital of the Jews is presented as a Zionist construct, one that directly contradicts the teachings of Judaism itself. Could you please explain this distinction and clarify the difference?
The main difference between Zionism and Judaism, and there are a tremendous amount of differences, but the main difference between Zionism and Judaism is that Judaism is a religion and Zionism is a political movement. But more than that, according to Judaism, being a Jew means being a member of a religion, even if you're not religious. There are certain people on this planet who are obligated to follow 613 commandments given by God to Moses in the book of Exodus in the Bible. Those are Jews. The rest of the world is obligated to follow 7 commandments that God gave Noah when he came out of the ark in the book of Genesis. So anybody who's obligated to follow the 613 commandments is a Jew, and that is the definition of a Jew. There is no political definition of Jew. There's no political or national, in the political sense, element to being Jewish. Being Jewish is completely religious, meaning if you don't believe in the religion, you don't believe the Jewish people exist. Now, there are people who don't believe in the religion that do believe the Jewish people exist, such as Benjamin Netanyahu, such as David Ben-Gurion, such as Theodore Herzl. But they changed the definition of Jew from religion, from a religious definition to a political definition. They were the ones that invented the idea that the Jews are a nation. Back in the day, they considered the nation maybe a race. Jabotinsky believed the Jews are a race. Others believe the Jews are an ethnicity. But in any case, they're a nationality. This is absolutely against the religion and is considered a form of idol worship. It also doesn't make sense. It's intellectually inconsistent. The Jews don't have any national characteristics. For thousands of years, We were all over the world. There are Ethiopian Jews and there are German Jews. They're certainly not of the same ethnicity. There are Yemenites Jews and there are Russian Jews, certainly not of the same ethnicity, certainly not of the same race. There are Jews who converted to Judaism. King David was a descendant of Ruth the convert, as it says in the Bible at the end of the book of Ruth. The prophet Obadiah was a convert, and some of our greatest sages were either converts or of families of converts or descended from converts. None of this makes sense if you're going to view the Jews as an ethnicity. In addition, by Jewish law, if there's a mixed marriage, a Jew marries a non-Jew. So whether the child is Jewish or not, it does not follow the rules of ethnicity. He's partly Jewish or something like that. If the mother is Jewish, the child is 100% Jewish. If the mother is not Jewish, the child is 100% not Jewish. The reason for that is because we derive it from our religious texts. If you don't believe in the religious texts, you don't even have a criteria to decide who a Jew is or what a Jew is, which is why in Israel, which is based on the Zionist definition of a Jew, they have inconsistent definitions of what a Jew is. They have a law of return, which says any Jew can come to Israel. Okay, an atheist Jew is still a Jew. He can come to Israel according to the law of return. But a Jew that believes in Christianity cannot come to Israel on the law of return. Israel's Supreme Court ruled that Jews that believe in any other religion, Christianity, Islam, Hindu, whatever, is not considered a Jew, which makes no sense logically, because if Judaism is a nationality, all nationalities in the world can practice whatever religion they want. The Russians can be of many religions. The French are of many religions. The Spanish are of many religions. Why can the Jews not be of many religions? Even the Greeks, who traditionally had their own roster of gods. They worshiped Zeus and Hercules and these gods. You can have Greek Christians. You can have Greek Jews. You do have all of these. For some reason, the Jews are a nationality, yet they're the only nationality that you cannot believe in any other religion except Judaism. But even though you can't believe in another religion, you can believe in no religion. So if you're an atheist and if you're a Christian, let's say, you're born Jewish and you believe in Jesus, maybe you're Jews for Jesus, you want to come to Israel on the law of return, the Israel would say, no, you're not qualified. But then you come and you say, all right, fine. You know what? I don't believe in any God. Forget about God. Previously, I believed he's a Trinity. Now I don't believe him in at all. Oh, if you don't believe in God at all, now you can come to Israel. Now you're Jewish. This, of course, doesn't make sense. In addition, every other nationality in the world, you can become a member of that nationality by being naturalized into the nationality. So if I want to become a Russian citizen and a Russian, I could move to Russia, become a Russian citizen, and if I marry a Russian and have Russian children, let's give most easiest case scenario. After 100 generations of Russians, and I speak Russian, and I sing the Russian national anthem, and I eat Russian food, whatever Russian food is, I will be, you won't be able to tell the difference between me and any other Russian. My generations, 100 generations from me, right? The great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. But for this alleged Jewish nationality, if you marry a Jewish man, a non-Jewish woman marries a Jewish man, there is no way for her to become naturalized into this Jewish nationality, both by Jewish law and Israeli law, except by religious conversion. So, and if you do not have a religious conversion, and the woman marries a Jewish man, or maybe even an Israeli non-Jewish woman marries an Israeli non-Jewish man, and they want to be part of the Jewish state, and they have Zionist children, and they speak Hebrew, and they eat Israeli food, and perhaps even the man was Jewish. After 1,000 generations where they are indistinguishable from any other secular Israeli, they're still not Jews, and they're still not part, they still, according to Israel's laws, do not have self-determination rights in Israel. The only way you can become part of this nation is through a religious conversion. So, but being a Jew is not a religion according to them. Now, none of this makes any sense. Worse yet is that in Judaism, there are various different, well, there are various different movements that consider themselves the authentic Jews. So the Reform Jews say they're authentic. The conservative Jews say they're authentic. Jews for Jesus say they're the authentic Jews. Being that there's no separation of church and state in Israel, the Orthodox rabbinate is the arbiters of all questions of Judaism in Israel. And Israel did not recognize conversions. Israel did not recognize conversions unless they're of the Orthodox denomination, which means that even though, and today, according to the law, a conservative Jew can come under the law of return, but the marriage of a conservative Jew to a Jew will not be performed in Israel. Now, that's a contradiction. The Benjamin Netanyahu had 3 wives. This is his third. His second wife was not Jewish. She converted before the marriage in order to marry Netanyahu as respect for his heritage or something to that effect, she said. But the state of Israel at that time did not recognize Netanyahu's marriage to this woman. Fleur Cates, her name was. And had she wanted to come as a convert to Israel on the law of return, she would not be qualified. Had Netanyahu's marriage taken place in Israel, it would not be allowed. So Israel is full of contradictions in terms of what it is, what the definition of a Jew is. Now, the reason they just don't say, all right, you know what, Rabbi Shapiro, everything you're saying is true. Let's just forget the idea of religion in Judaism. We're going to change ourselves to a nationality. We're going to have a naturalization process. You could be a Jew by naturalization, just like you could be a Russian. They can't do that. And the reason is because the Zionists wanted to create the movement of Zionism, and they had customers. They were selling a product. The product was come to Israel. The product was an ideology. The product was safety for the Jews. That's what they were selling. It turns out it's snake oil potion, but that's what they were selling. Their customers were only Jews, and Jews for thousands of years only identified as a religion. And if the Zionists would now come and say openly that we are redefining a Jew, we're giving different parameters, we don't accept converts, maternal lineage isn't the criterion, we're going to make criteria the same as Russia or Mexico or Spain, nobody would follow them. So they had to say that we are following in the Jewish tradition. It's just that the rabbis were a little messed up in the head. The religion's a little messed up because after 2,000 years, you guys don't want Zionism, you don't want a land, you don't want a country. And the reason why we didn't is because we're a religion. We have nothing to do with any of these things. But the Zionists wanted us to be a nationality. So in order to sugarcoat their heretical ideology for the Jews, they had to kind of couch the Zionism in things that the Jews already understand. If the Zionists would have shown their hand and told the Jews, we want to redefine you and we don't believe in anything about the religion, then they wouldn't be a good customer. If the Zionists said, our customers are Jews and our whole goal is to destroy Jewish identity, the Jews would never have accepted it. In fact, all the way at the beginning, the first Zionist Congress, 1897, in Basel, Switzerland, there was a movement, there was a suggestion to accept Uganda/Kenya as the Jewish state rather than Palestine. And the truth is, why would they need Palestine? If they're making a new Jewish movement, why do you have to have the Holy Land? So the religious rabbis the Orthodox rabbis who were Zionists, who were interested in Zionism, said, yes, let's take Uganda. It's much better than Palestine. It makes much more sense. But Theodor Herzl and his guys, the non-religious Zionists, the ones that were against the religion and wanted to destroy it, said, no, for marketing, we need Palestine. Otherwise, it's going to look like a non-Jewish movement. And you see today that so many people think that Israel represents the Jews. Israel is the state of the Jews. Zionism represents Judaism. The only way they were able to pull this off, so they have the support from the evangelicals. They have world opinion that, well, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, or at least they could try to make that opinion, is if they masquerade as the Jews, not only as Jews, as the Jews, the Jewish state. So yeah, Jerusalem was a holy city to the Jews. The Holy Land what they call Israel today, or more or less the borders of Israel, is a holy land. But because the Jews are not a state or a city or a country, they have no capital. And because there's no such thing as a capital of the Jews, just like there's no such thing as the capital of the Christians. They have a holy city. The Muslims have maybe holy cities, but the Jews do not have a capital. We are not a political demographic. The Zionists wanted to change the Jews. It's not merely it's a political movement as opposed to religion. It's it's an ideological movement to change the Jews into a political identity as opposed to a religious identity. And therefore, they invented this. They took all the Jewish concepts and changed them from religious to political. Holy became national. A holy city in a religion has value, but to the Zionists, it was the national capital as opposed to the holy city. They changed the Holy Land into what they call a national homeland. It is not a national homeland. It is a holy land. It is not national because the Jews are not a nation, and it's not a homeland. If you want to know it, I'll explain that to you shortly. But they took all our concepts, everything we hold dear, anything that's holy, and changed it from religious value to national value. So the entire Zionist idea that the Jews own Israel, or that the Jews as a whole own Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people, is nonsense. There's no such thing as the capital of the Jewish people.
There is a publication, or rather a commentary of yours, related to the issue of foreign embassies. As a continuation of your historical overview, I would like to ask you to explain one more important distinction. You wrote that all countries considering the possibility of relocating their embassies should understand that such a move benefits only Israel as a state and the Zionist movement, while bringing no benefit to the Jewish people as a whole. You also stated that Israel as a state does not represent world Jewry. Could you please explain what the relocation of an embassy actually signifies, why it benefits only Israel and Zionism, why it does not benefit the Jewish people as a whole, and why Israel should not be equated with world Jewry?
Zionists knew that there was anti-Semitism. They experienced anti-Semitism. The turning point came in Russia, actually, in the pogroms in 1881. Many secular Russian Jews figured that if they're going to be not religious and they're going to assimilate with the Russians, the anti-Semites won't hate them anymore. They figured that if they're just like the non-Jewish Russians, what difference is there between the Jews and the non-Jews? The reason why the Jews are hated, the Zionists said, is because the Jews are ugly, disgusting, immoral. The religion is sick. The Jews are sick. They're messed up in the head. And therefore, they're going to be secular. They will assimilate, and there will not be any more anti-Semitism. But they were surprised. In 1881, there started a succession of lethal pogroms against the Jews in Russia. Many, many Jews were killed, and that gave the Zionists an identity crisis. They said, we don't want to be Jews because Jews are disgusting, but we can't be non-Jews because the non-Jews won't let us in. They won't let us. So what do we do? So the answer was, they figured that the reason why the non-Jews hated the not religious Jews was because they still look at the Jews with the old, as the image of the old Jew was still in their heads, that they're not assimilated enough. They need to assimilate as a people in whole. They need to change their identity totally, from a religion to a nationality. There are other Zionists that said there always will be anti-Semitism, but at least we'll have our own, people will later come to respect us. Theodor Herzl said, he wrote that as soon as Zionism gets off the ground, everybody will, their anti-Semitism will disappear off the face of the earth. Leo Pinsker, a Zionist, he said that once the Jews get a state, anti-Semitism will disappear. What they wanted to do is they wanted to change the image of the Jews so people should see that the Jews are not like me. The Jews are more like Benjamin Netanyahu, and then everybody will love them. So they tried. They tried to change the Jews. They tried to change the Jews to a nationality. And the reason that would change the Jews was because whereas religions aspire to certain things, they aspire to follow the religion, they aspire to serve God, they aspire to be holy. And the Jews have a certain idea of what it means to serve God, what it means to be holy. But nationalities, countries aspire to other things. They aspire to be strong. They aspire to have armies. They aspire to win gold medals and win Eurovision song contests. They aspire to all sorts of things. And once the Jews look at themselves differently, once the Jews look at themselves as a nation, they will change their aspirations, they will change their values, and they will actually change their personalities. And then and only then will the Jews be able to live in peace with everybody else. But we need to change the definition of a Jew. That's what they believed.
Some critics of Zionism argue that the ideology cannot function if Jews are able to live peacefully and securely outside the State of Israel. According to this view, instability and fear are deliberately emphasized in order to mobilize Jewish communities and secure political support for Israel. Within this framework, I would like to ask the following question. When we speak about Jews who practice monotheistic Judaism as a religious tradition, as opposed to those who, as critics claim, use Jewish identity for political or material gain, who are the actors that benefit from promoting Zionist policies in the name of the Jewish people, and how, in practice, is this agenda advanced in a way that ultimately exploits Jewish identity and Jewish communities? Could you please explain this distinction?
Zionists, in order for Zionism to be successful, first, Israel needs to be perceived as the state of all the Jews. In the words of Benjamin Netanyahu, Avigdor Lieberman, Danny Ayalon, the way the Zionists themselves express this is, what Japan is to the Japanese and France is to the French, Israel is to the Jews. Such that you cannot have, just as you cannot have France, you cannot have French people without France, you cannot have American people without America, you cannot have Jewish people without Israel. That's what they need in order to succeed in their movement. The reason they need this is because, number one, and this is Israel's Supreme Court said this, the right to self-determination applies only to nations as a whole and not to fractions of nations. So if the Zionists want to say that they are the Jews practicing self-determination, the entire Zionist movement is the Jewish people coming back to Palestine and that they have a right to the land, they need to represent all the Jewish people. Otherwise, it's not the Jews owning the land. It's not the Jews returning. It has to be the Jews and not just some Jews. So they need to be able to convince the world that whatever they do and say, that represents the Jews in the same way any other government represents its citizens. The problem is that's not such a believable claim because there are Jews all over the world, and most Jews don't even live in Israel. So, and if the Jews don't want to live in Israel, if they don't look at Israel as their home, then what connection does Israel have with world's Jewry? In order for Zionism to work, in order for the Zionists to be able to claim their land, they have to claim the Jews are coming home. But if the Jews are not interested, if most Jews are not interested in Israel, in living there, then why, then their claim is false. They're not the Jews. So they're, or in addition, the whole purpose of Zionism, the only reason why they claim, according to them, Jews need to support Zionism, is because if they don't, then anti-Semitism will get bigger. The Zionists try to convince Jews that because of Israel, all the anti-Semites are scared to harm Jews. In addition, they claim if anti-Semites do harm Jews, you could always run to Israel. So Israel is, number one, the homeland of the Jews, like, how do they say it? Mother Russia. So this is Father Israel, or something like that. But so the Jews have to look at it ideologically as their home. And two, the Jews have to look at it as a utility to be able to come there. But if the Jews don't need Israel as a utility, because they're safe everywhere else. In fact, right now, the Jews are safer everywhere else they live, all over the world, except Israel. Israel is the most dangerous place for Jews anywhere that Jews live. More Jews were killed in Israel than anywhere else in the world. In fact, more than, including even Gulag deaths in Russia, in Soviet Russia, the amount of Jews killed since 1948 in Israel versus the amount of Jews killed because they're Jews since 1948, everywhere else in the world, there are more Jews killed in Israel. So Israel is not really a utility. And also ideologically, I'm an American. My family is from Poland. My wife's family is from Lithuania. What connection do I have with Israel? So in order to, they have a product to sell. In order to convince the Jews they need the product, they love anti-Semitism. The Zionists love anti-Semitism. They want anti-Semitism. And every time an anti-Semitic thing happens, take the latest thing in Australia, right? So Israel comes and they say, okay, we own the Jews. We're the ones that protect them. We're the ones that care about their safety. So Israel wants everybody to think that, including the Jews, that the Jews belong to Israel. Look at the image they're creating. A bunch of Jews in Australia were killed. Terrible thing. But now it's not rabbis that are coming to, they do have rabbis in Australia, but an international envoy from Israel comes and they say, we have to make sure that anti-Semitism is reduced all over the world. They are positioning themselves as the protectors of the Jews, both to the Jews and to the world. And they are also convincing the Jews that they have no other place to live except Israel. In Israel, they'll be safe. So it's anti-Semitism is good for two people. It's good for anti-Semites and it's good for Jews. There's one more connection. Oh, there are many more, but there's one more fundamental connection between anti-Semites and and Zionists. The connection is that both the anti-Semites and the Zionists want people to think that Zionism is Judaism. All the Nazi anti-Semites and all the Nazi websites, and you see it all over online and social media, they're all saying that all the Jews are Zionists. And if you tell them, as I do all the time, that Jews are not Zionists, they say, you lie. It's not true. Jews are Zionists. Zionists want people to think Jews are Zionists because they want to legitimize Zionism by claiming it's Judaism. Anti-Semites want everybody to think that Judaism is Zionism in order to delegitimize Judaism by saying it's Zionism. So did I say that right? Zionists want everybody to think Zionism is Judaism in order to legitimize Zionism by claiming it's Judaism. Anti-Semites want you to think Zionism is Judaism in order to delegitimize Judaism by making everybody think it's Zionism. So Zionists and anti-Semites have the same agenda. Get the Jews out of our countries. The anti-Semites in America always say, Jews, go to Israel, kick them out. Well, that's great for Israel. In fact, Herzl said that the anti-Semites will be the Zionist movement's greatest friend.
The large Satmar synagogue, about which Torah scholars said during Netanyahu's visit to the United States, I quote, Netanyahu is an enemy of the Torah. Every time he comes to the U.S., Netanyahu behaves as if he represents the Jewish people. Even our brothers in the Holy Land suffer from his actions and his laws. Could you please explain the significance of the Satmar synagogue and of the Torah scholars, that is, their influence and authority, and why do they make such claims about Netanyahu?
First, when we talk about Satmar, a few things I need to preface. First, this is not only Satmar that believes this. Satmar has a policy that they're outspoken about it. An important thing that we need to know about anti-Zionist Jews, that most of them you are not going to hear about. And the reason you're not going to hear about them is because Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. We don't try to convert other people to Judaism. And anti-Zionist Jews don't go around explaining their position, just like most Jews just don't go around explaining what Judaism is to the world, because it's not something that's important to us. Anti-Zionism for the anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews does not mean that we oppose one particular policy of Israel, or that Israel is doing a particular thing that is wrong. That could also be true. But anti-Zionism for the Orthodox Jews means much more. It means that Israel has nothing to do with the Jews. Israel is not the state of the Jews. To say Israel is a state of the Jews is a lie. The Jews don't have a state. The Jews are a religion. We are not connected to any foreign country. My family is from Poland. I'm a citizen of the United States of America. My wife's family is from Lithuania. We have nothing to do with some country that was created in 1948 by a bunch of people who were against my religion and claimed to have created a state that represents me. To us, that's simply stupid. That's not true. These people called Zionists can run around talking about the Jews and how they represent the Jews and how their country is the Jewish state. And we, non-proselytizing Orthodox Jews that stick to ourselves, that always have, always, all we want is to be left alone, to practice our religion. I'm in the United States of America. On the 4th of July, I hang out an American flag. I pay my taxes. I just want to study and pray. That's what I do all day. I'm a retired man. All day I spend my time studying the Torah, praying. All I want is to spend some time with my family, take a walk along the bay, pay my taxes, and be left alone. Some country 6,000 miles away says they're my country. That's insane. It's like, there are all sorts of people that claim they really represent the Jews. They're the black Hebrews that claim they represent the Jews, the black people that say that they're the real Jews. Netanyahu and the Zionists say that they represent the Jews. They don't. Again, anti-Zionism is not that, I agree that Israel is the Jewish state, but I'm against what Israel is doing. That's a form of Zionism. Once you say Israel is connected to the Jews, that's a form of Zionism, in my mind, to us. Anytime you say, well, I'm a Jew, and because I'm a Jew, I'm obligated to criticize my country, Israel, when they do something wrong. That's not us. We are much more against Zionism than that. To us, Israel has as much to do with us as China, as Ukraine, as Russia. Zelensky is Jewish, no less than Netanyahu. And we have no responsibility to criticize what Zelensky does because he's Jewish. And we have no responsibility to criticize what Israel does. Israel is to us a foreign country, like Russia, like Ukraine, like China. We have nothing to do with it. And therefore, when Netanyahu, their actions have nothing to do with us. Nothing. When my country does something bad, I'll criticize it. If my country, let's say, bombs Afghanistan, and if I don't like it, I should say they're wrong. If my family does something and I don't like it, I should say, no, kids, you did something wrong. But if a foreign country does something and I don't like it, well, Israel's doing something wrong is no different to me than China doing something wrong, than Russia or Ukraine or Afghanistan doing something wrong. In Satmar, their rabbi gave them a mandate that they need to explain this to the world. In 1967, a few hours after Israel won the Six-Day War, it was an incredible thing. And this is one of the reasons why the rabbi of Satmar was considered perhaps the wisest rabbi in the entire world. It's incredible. And this is in writing. A few hours, literally, after Israel won the Six-Day War, it was on a Saturday, he said that it is a big mitzvah. Mitzvah is a good deed, a religious goods deed. It is a big mitzvah for everybody to tell the world that the Zionists don't represent us, because we have no idea what kind of trouble this is going to make, this victory of the Six-Day War. When people think that Israel represents the Jews, people will be transformed into anti-Semites because of Israel. And therefore, we have to tell the whole world that Israel doesn't represent the Jews and we have nothing to do with them. Again, not to necessarily be connected with their actions to say, as a Jew, I say it's wrong, because as a Jew has nothing to do with Israel. Israel is not the state of the Jews. Israel is the state of the Israelis. Israel represents the Israelis the same way America represents the Americans and Mexico represents the Mexicans, but rather so that people should not think that Israel is telling the truth when they say they're the state of the Jews. We say we have nothing to do with Israel. And therefore, getting back to your question, Netanyahu claiming he represents the Jews, Israel claiming they're the state of the Jews. Netanyahu even mentioned some things, some words implying he's the leader of the Jews. Naftali Bennett once referred to Netanyahu as the prime minister of the Jews. This is all a lie. If Netanyahu's the prime minister of Jews, so I'm Queen Rania of Jordan. It's insane. I'm an American. Again, my family's from Poland. We have nothing to do with Israel. And he's an enemy of the Jews because Zionism is diametrically opposed to Judaism for many reasons. The main reason is the actual definition of what a Jew is. According to Judaism, Judaism is a religion. I am a citizen of America. My family's from Poland. My being Jewish has nothing to do with any country that I'm associated with. My wife's family is from Brest-Litovsk. My family is from Częstochow in Poland. The fact that there's a foreign country out there that claims to have some type of political connection or any connection, to me, it's a lie. What it does is it changes the Jews from a religion to a nationality, to a political people. It's a lie. It has nothing to do with me. It's an attack on Jewish identity. Zionism, Netanyahu, who is a Zionist, would like to erase Jewish identity from the face of the earth. They would like to change the Jews from a religion to an ethno-religion, to a national religion. And it's not true. And not only that, it's a sin to change your Jewish identity and to believe that your Judaism has anything to do with anything other than God. If you believe that your Judaism has something to do with something other than God, according to Jewish law, according to halacha, you are an idol worshiper. It's considered the same as bowing down to a totem pole, because you're taking some foreign idea, the idea of nationalism, and you're bringing it in to your Jewish identity. It's different than if, let's say, somebody sins and maybe they're going to, let's say, eat some non-kosher food because they couldn't resist the smell of this non-kosher food. They're a sinner, but they're not an idol worshiper because they're not changing what it means to be a Jew. To bring in a foreign influence and to change what it means to be a Jew, which Zionists do, they are idol worshippers. Now, I do know, and you may ask me, next question, this is what I'm expecting, whether you're going to ask me or not, that, well, there are a lot of Orthodox Jews that are Zionists that believe this. Two things. First thing, there are Orthodox Jews who believe what I just said, such as the settlers. They too are idol worshippers. And as I mentioned last time, just as the Christians have many, many millions and millions of Christians who are Zionists, the evangelicals, more Christians are Zionists than there are Jews who are Zionists. The Catholics and people who are not evangelicals will just say, yes, they're Christians, but they're not good Christians. They're corrupt Christians. They have corrupted their Christianity. And although I do not claim to know which version of Christianity is right, because I'm not a Christian and I've never studied it, I have studied Judaism. And to us, our version of Judaism is right, and the Zionists are a different religion. The Zionists are going to say we're a different religion. And without going into, the Christians tell me that Jesus is in my holy books and I should become a Christian. The Muslims tell me Islam is in my holy books and I should believe Muhammad is the prophet. We're a different religion. We have different interpretations. The Zionists tell me, just as the Christians and Muslims do, that Zionism is in my holy books. We have a different interpretation, and the Zionists are a different religion. Just as in Christianity, you may not be able to tell the difference between an evangelical and, let's say, a Catholic. They both walk around, let's say, with a cross around their neck. And Jews who are Zionists and Jews who are non-Zionists, both, let's say, have a yarmulke like I do and a beard like I do. And you may not be able to tell the difference, but that's the way religions work. To us, the Zionists are heretics. They're idol worshippers. They are corrupting Judaism, and they're not good Jews. That's a corruption of Judaism. And therefore, when Netanyahu comes to America and he mentions this, that he represents all the Jews, he's a liar, but not merely in politics. He's a liar when he says he represents the Jews and he doesn't. It's a crime against the Jews. A foreign head of state to come to America and to say he represents citizens of America who have nothing to do with him, never lived in his country, don't plan on living in his country, have nothing to do with his country, and the man has the gall, he has the chutzpah, he has the audacity to claim that he represents the Jews, citizens of the United States of America, Jews all over. If there are Zionists in America who would like Netanyahu to represent them, that's their business. But for him to say he represents all the Jews, to represent me, he's a liar. And it's a disgusting, despicable act of claiming that the Jews are not loyal to their country exclusively. It's an anti-Semitic dual loyalty trope. He's an anti-Semite. But besides that, it's an attack on Judaism because there are no foreign politicians that represent Jews. Donald Trump represents the citizens of America as an American, not because I'm Jewish. He represents me in the sense that I'm an American and he's my president. Netanyahu is not the Pope. He doesn't represent my religion. We don't have a Pope, but Netanyahu believes that being Jewish is not just a religion, it's a nationality, and he is the prime minister of that entire nationality. So there are two issues. Number one, it's a trope against Jews. It's an actual anti-Semitic trope from a material perspective, from a political perspective, from an anti-Semitic perspective. And number two, it is against God and against Judaism and against my religion from a religious perspective.
My next question follows directly from what you have just said. A group of religious leaders and figures within Judaism sent a letter to the Meta Corporation. In their view, Meta seriously undermines the true identity of the Jewish people by using the word Zionist as a synonym for the word Jew. I would like to read the statement to you and then ask you a question. The statement reads as follows, I quote, "It is dangerous for Jews to be associated with Israel, a foreign state located more than 6,000 miles away from us. Judaism is our religion, but not our nationality. This association not only undermines our religious identity, but also exposes us to the risk of unjust attacks and harm. We urge the Meta team to reconsider its decision. Your platform has the power to shape public discourse and perception. We call on you to use this power responsibly and to avoid compromising the safety of the people you claim to protect. Revising this policy would be an important step toward ensuring the safety and well-being of the Jewish community." And from this follows my question. Is there a threat to Jews arising from what is happening on social media? For example, when Zionist and Jew are treated as synonyms? And second, if such a threat exists, is it chaotic in nature? Or is it a systematic effort, what we might call organized hostility against Jews? What do you think?
Okay, so here's what's happening. The idea that Jews being associated with Israel is dangerous to Jews is quite simple. I don't even see how anybody can argue with this. It's very simple. When America bombs Japan, the Japanese are angry at Americans. When America bombs Afghanistan, the Afghanis are angry at Americans. When America bombs Japan, when Japan bombs America, Americans are angry at Japanese. Even when President Trump referred to COVID as a Chinese virus, there were people, criminals of course, attacking Chinese people, beating them up here in New York, in Chinatown. It's a neighborhood where Chinese people live because of the Chinese virus. Now, obviously, you cannot attack Chinese people because COVID was called a Chinese virus. That's criminal. And you can't attack American civilians because America bombed Afghanistan. That's criminal. But there are criminals out there, and they will do such things. Now, here's the question. If when America bombs Afghanistan, the Afghanis are angry at the Americans, and when Japan bombs America, Americans are angry at Japanese, and when COVID is called the Chinese virus, people beat up criminals, beat up Chinese people. When Israel bombs Gaza, when the ICC puts out a warrant for war crimes, for the arrest of Netanyahu because of war crimes, when there are many people calling what Israel did a genocide, right? And the whole world is angry at Israel. Who are they going to be angry at? Israelis or Jews? Well, they would normally be angry at Israelis, because just as people would be angry at Americans when America does something, bombs somebody, they'd be angry at Japanese when Japan bombs somebody. They should be angry at Israelis in the same way. Again, I'm not justifying harming any civilians because of this. You cannot blame the residents of a country. You cannot attack them because of what their country did. You can't attack civilians. But again, there are criminals out there. There are bad actors. However, since Israel said that they are the state of the Jews, not the state of the Israelis, not only do they say it, it's their law. Their law is that Israel is the Jewish state. It's in their law. The 2018 nation state law says that Israel is the nation state of all the Jews all over the world. And mind you, there is no other country like this in the entire world. There is no country that claims that it is the country and that they represent people who are not their citizens, never lived there, their families never lived there, have nothing to do with them. Even, let's say, a convert. Let's take somebody like Ivanka Trump, who converted to Judaism. Israel claims that they are her state. She's just a religious convert. She doesn't even have Jewish ancestors. She follows the Jewish the ways of the Moses and Abraham, etc. But there is no country in the world that claims that they represent people that have nothing to do with them. And again, I'm not Israeli American. This is very important. Whenever I say this, people think in their mind, yes, well, Italy doesn't claim to represent the Italian Americans. That is not my point. Italy doesn't claim to represent the Chinese Americans. I'm not Israeli American. My family's from Poland. Again, I have nothing to do with that country, Israel. Israel's statement, their law, their essence that claims to be the state of the Jews, what that does is, instead of people associating Israel's actions with Israelis, they associate it with the Jews. So if people don't like what Israel does, and again, it's criminal, they're not going to be angry at Israelis. The criminals, the bad actors are going to attack Jews all over the world. They attacked Jews in Australia, clearly because of Israel. And again, it's criminal, but this is blowback. And it's not merely that Jews are connected to Israel according to Zionism in the way that Japanese Americans are connected to Japan. Japan doesn't claim to be the country of Japanese Americans. They agree that if you're an American citizen, Japan no longer has any claims on your loyalty, because you're not Japanese anymore. Israel claims to be the state of all the Jews, not the Israelis. Israel claims that they are not the state of the Israelis. Israel's Supreme Court said that the foundation stone of Zionism is that the Jews are a nationality, and of course that Israel is the state of that nationality. Israel's status law, the Jewish Agency Status Law of 1952, said that Israel expects Jews to cooperate with Israel, Jews all over the world. There is no country like that. Not only does it not claim it, but Israel claims that they are more connected to the Jews than Japanese Americans are connected to Japanese. Israel claims that the Jews are constituents of Israel. Israel claims that they expect loyalty of the Jews. It's incredible. And therefore, Jews suffer because of Israel. Jews need to say that this is a lie. It's that's absolutely the way it is. It's not merely that it's not merely that disavowing Israel. And when I say disavowing, we have never avowed Israel. So it's not disavowing. We just to communicate that when Israel says that they are the state of the Jews, it's a lie. It's not merely that it ensures the safety of the Jews. What it does is it helps remove the danger, the synthetic danger that Israel has put the Jews in. Israel puts a target on our backs, and they do this on purpose, by the way. They know that when they do this, Jews will suffer. But then it's better for Israel, because Israel doesn't say, okay, we're sorry, Jews, this is what happened. Instead, Israel says, oh, Jews are attacked. You see, everybody's anti-Semites. You're not safe anywhere except Israel. When Jews were attacked in Copenhagen, when Jews were attacked in Paris, what did Netanyahu say? He said, oh, everybody has to move to Israel. Whenever there's anti-Semitism, they say, oh, Jews have to move to Israel. In Australia, just now, when Jews were attacked, Jews were killed in Australia. Clearly, it was blowback because of Israel. So what did Israel say? Oh, it's because people don't support Israel enough. It's because Australia recognized the Palestinian state. It's because of speech criticizing Israel. Israel will never admit that they put Jews in danger. Instead, they will say, no, Jews are in danger because of anti-Semites. That's the default. It has nothing to do with Israel. You would have been attacked anyway, even though statistics show it's not true. Statistics show the Tel Aviv Cantor Center for Anti-Semitism in Israel monitors anti-Semitic acts. They've been doing it for, I don't know, decades. And it's clear from them that whenever Israel does something that people don't like, whenever they bomb something, whenever they attack Gaza, attacks on Jews go up. Whenever they don't, attacks on Jews go down. And this data is so granular. They said even when Jews bomb the so-called Jewish state, I mean to say, whenever Israel bombs a hospital in Gaza, on those days following, in the middle of a war, when a hospital is bombed, the Al-Shifa hospital was bombed, during those days, attacks on Jews went up. It is clear, there's clearly a correlation statistically between Israel's actions and attacks on Jews. There is no correlation between criticism of Israel and attacks on Jews. There is no correlation that says when the United Nations, let's say, condemns Israel, that the attacks on Jews go up. They do not. That when people start criticizing Israel, attacks on Jews go up. They do not. The correlation is between Israel's actions and the blowback against Jews. As our vice president, J.D. Vance, said, that anti-Semitism in America is primarily blowback because of Israel. And it has nothing to do with us. Nobody should suffer blowback because of Israel. Neither should American Israelis. But we have nothing to do with Israel. It's very simple. If somebody would come over to me and say, you're Chinese, and because of a Chinese virus, I'm going to beat you up, what would you say? You would say, hey, I'm not Chinese. Mm-hmm. So we need to do the same thing. When people say you're Jewish and we're going to harm you because of Israel, it's only natural and normal for Jews to say, hey, I have nothing to do with Israel. The problem is that Israel has brainwashed many Jews that if you say Jews have nothing to do with Israel, that supports the anti-Israel narrative. Israel's not the Jewish state. If that's what you say, you're a Jew and you have nothing to do with Israel, you are communicating that Israel's not the state of the Jews. If Israel's not the state of the Jews, then what right do the Jews in Israel have, the Zionists, what right do the Zionists have to say that they're the state of the Jews and to perform actions to ensure a Jewish majority? What right do they have to say that they will not allow a non-Jewish majority? What right do they have to say that they're the nation state of the Jews? What right do they have to say in law that only Jews have self-determination in Israel? So if you dare say that you have nothing to do with Israel, then Israel's narrative is refuted, and that means Hamas is going to attack more Jews. So you Jews need to suffer. You Jews need to suffer and let people attack you and kill you, because otherwise the Zionist narrative is going to be criticized. And there are Jews who unfortunately believe that. So there are very many Jews who will be quiet, and they'll even try to attack Jews who say that they have nothing to do with Israel. You're a Hamas supporter if you say you have nothing to do with Israel, because you can't allow Israel's narrative. Everything Israel says has to be supported by all Jews. Otherwise, Hamas is going to kill Jews and the terrorists are going to kill Jews. The truth is the opposite. The reason why all these attacks on Jews are taking place to a large extent, statistically, is because people are critical of Israel's narrative and Israel's actions. And therefore, they blame Jews as being part of this narrative. It's very simple. It's very simple. It's the same as the Chinese virus. If somebody said I was Chinese and they want to beat me up because of that, I'd say I'm not Chinese. I'm not Israeli. I have nothing to do with Israel. The truth of the matter is, it makes Jews much safer. It's Zionist propaganda that Jews need to agree with everything Israel says. Otherwise, it's going to be less safe for Jews. The truth is, Jews need to protect themselves. Jews have a right to self-determination. Jews are not bound to Israel's narrative, especially a narrative that's against my religion, against my nationality, against my safety. Just because, let Israel change their narrative if they want. I'm not going to be a human shield for Israel. And I'm not going to agree with the Zionists that try to bully Jews to agree with everything Israel says by threat of any type of threats they can threaten us with.
Many of my friends, acquaintances, and analysts do not understand one thing, and I truly hope you can help us. What is the issue? I read many Jewish scholars and religious figures, and I have often encountered the following argument. The Jewish people do not depend on the state of Israel for their identity or for their existence. The position is that Zionism, according to religious leaders, deprived the Jewish people of their authentic identity in way of existence. The Jewish people have existed for more than 3 millennia and have lived in exile for over 2,000 years. The goal of Zionism was to live off Jewish history and faith, but to create a completely opposite identity. Could you please explain how it happened that Zionists managed to exploit your history and your faith, creating the antithesis of the religious Jew? And more broadly, what goal is being pursued by the destruction of the Jewish people, the exploitation of the Jewish people, or the rewriting of the history of the Jewish people, including their religion?
The way the Zionists did this is very simple. Kind of like Soviet Russia. Every head of state of Soviet Russia wrote a history that contradicted the previous history of Soviet Russia. They rewrote Jewish history books. They rewrote Jewish ideology books. They have a country, an actual country. They started teaching this. Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, hired a man by the name of Ben-Zion Dinur, and he told him, create a Jewish history that leads up to Israel. They used archaeology to support the idea that Israel, the Israeli version of Jewish history. Not that archaeology shows it, but rather they emphasized the fact that the Jews once upon a time had countries. There was King David, King Saul. They changed Jewish history. I'll give you an example, a very simple example of how. There are many Jews in Israel in the public school system that are taught to be Zionists, and they're taught about Judaism. But the Judaic studies curriculum in the Israeli public schools do not teach the Talmud. They do not teach Jewish religion. They teach Bible, but they start Bible studies mostly with the book of Joshua. The 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy is not taught. Joshua is a bigger figure in Jewish history to the Zionists than Moses was. In fact, listen to this. In Jerusalem, the streets of Jerusalem are mostly named after Jewish historical figures, biblical figures, modern figures, religious figures, non-religious Zionist figures, all sorts of people. Every prophet, for the most part, has a street named after him in Jerusalem. Every Zionist, prominent Zionist does as well. But guess what? There is no street named after Moses in all of Jerusalem. There's no street named after Abraham or Isaac or Jacob in all of Jerusalem. The street starts with Bin Nun, Joshua, because Jewish history starts, according to Zionist ideology, with Joshua. The Zionist political scientist Shlomo Avineri pointed this out. Heinrich Gretz, who really was the first one to change Jewish history and to make the Jews into a civilization rather than a religion, starts his national, even though he writes about Moses, but he starts the national history of the Jews with Joshua. Why? Because Joshua in the Bible was the one who brought the Jews into the Holy Land. Moses was never in the Holy Land. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was before the Jews as a people went into the Holy Land. So the history of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, all the way to Moses is obscured, and Joshua is emphasized. Now, Joshua to us was a righteous rabbi. The walls of Jericho fell as a miracle, and there were so many miracles that Joshua did. But to the Zionists, Joshua was a conqueror, and he conquered the land of Canaan. And the Zionists then created books where they are reliving or reenacting or following in the footsteps of Joshua. Now, to us, Josh, you want to follow footsteps of Joshua? Then follow God's prophecies, follow the religion. That's not what they're taught in the public schools. Following in the footsteps of Joshua is conquering the land of Canaan for the Jewish people. Joshua went from being a rabbi to a conqueror. And a guy, Moshe Dayan, for example, wrote a book. It's called Living with the Bible. I have it, where he took biblical stories and he explained how, in his interpretation, he, as a general in the Israeli army and as a soldier, reenacted those scenes. So if you have, let's say, for example, Jonathan left Saul's army and miraculously won a battle, he will explain that it wasn't really a miracle. God helps the strong people, and he'll explain how where he threw a grenade into a window that blew up a gunman, and that's similar to what, and it's in the same place that Jonathan won his battle. They would remove God from the picture. They would put themselves into the picture. They would reinterpret the Bible as similar events as what happens to Israel. Another example, take the holiday of Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah is a celebration of the fact that the Jews found 1 flask of oil and for the temple, and it lasted 8 days because the Greeks, the Syrian Greeks, they vandalized the temple and there was not enough oil. There was a war where the Jews knew they couldn't win the war. Well, let's rewind. Here's the Hanukkah story. The Syrian Greeks were made decrees against the Jews that the Jews cannot be religious. The Jews said, we're going to martyr ourselves. We'd rather die than give up our religion. So they took up arms against the Syrian Greek army, knowing that they would die. That was their intent, to die for their religion. God made a miracle and they won the war, even though they had no chance. Then they were able to retake the temple, and because of vandalism of the Greeks, they only found one flask of oil, and it lasted 8 days. That's Hanukkah. The Talmud says that the reason why Hanukkah was established as a holiday had nothing to do with the miracle of the war. Nothing to do with that. Because Jews do not celebrate war victories. Jews, all over the Old Testament, there are stories of wars. Like in every other page, starting from the book of Joshua on, there are wars. But we have no holy site, no significant site of the place of any of the wars. Like in America, we have the Alamo in San Antonio, Texas, a place of battle. We do not celebrate that. Jews do not celebrate wars, not at all. So even though there was a miracle, we thank God in our prayers for winning the war because that saved our lives, but the holiday had nothing to do with the war. It had only to do with the miracle of the oil. The Zionists flipped it all around. Zionists portray Hanukkah as a victory of war again for self-determination, that the war was for self-determination and they won the war not because of a miracle. In fact, the chief education officer of the IDF made a song. You could find it on YouTube. It says, the chorus goes like this: Nes lo kara lanu, no miracle happens to us. Pach shemen lo matzanu, we never found a flask of oil. We did the miracle, we won the war, we created the light. It's all because of our strength, nothing because of God. This, and now even today, if you go into a department store, let's say Macy's in December, you will find a Christmas display and a Hanukkah display, let's say. The Christmas display always has a color pattern, green and red. The Hanukkah display always has a color pattern, blue and white. Now, what does blue and white have to do with Hanukkah? The green and red for the Christmas, that's the hollies, the berries, and the leaves. But what does blue and white have to do with Hanukkah? It's fire, it's oil, it's a gold's menorah, you would say red, yellow, gold, or something like that. Blue and white is the Israeli flag. The Zionists have created a propaganda system and an educational system. And whereas we Jews teach it in our private schools, in our books, the Zionists created a worldwide educational system of advertising, of propaganda, of hasbara, that this is Jewish history. And since the majority of Jews are not religious, the majority of Jews all over the world are not religious at all. They are not going to access our religious school books. They are going to have access, and the Zionists did this on purpose. These are all non-religious people, Ben Dinur, Ben Gurion. They hated the religion. They instead took the religion, the Bible, and made it into a Zionist narrative. And this is already generations going on, over 100 years this is happening. Over 100 years, many, many generations. This has been going on in the Israeli schools. And they look at people like me thinking that we don't really understand Judaism. And the reason why I think Judaism is what I think it is because this is part of the Zionist narrative, that we were in exile and we weren't living in our own homeland, and the rabbis made things temporary and crazy, and being persecuted harmed us, and I'm traumatized and I don't understand. And the Zionists are the real Jews like Joshua, who was a conqueror, and the real Jews and the prophets preached morals. Now the prophets preached mostly don't worship idols and follow God. They left all that out. Every Jew, now you have Jews educated, them, their fathers, their grandfathers, great-grandfathers, great-great-grandfathers, great-great-great-grandfathers, who were educated with an entirely different religion. It's very simple. Again, let's compare it to the Christians. You have evangelicals and you have Catholics, right? And I know there are people who are not evangelicals who are not Catholics. Let's just use my example. The evangelicals have their schools. The Catholics have their schools. The evangelicals are taught that God said you have to support the state of Israel. The Catholics are not. How do the evangelicals convince millions and millions, tens of millions, not millions, tens of millions of Catholics between the biggest evangelical church organization here in America and South Africa, you have some 20 million evangelicals there alone. Tens of millions of them. How do you convince them? The answer is educate them. You can make how did the Soviet Russians convince people that communism is the best thing in the world and that the Americans over here are the way the communists portrayed them? Very simple. They educated them that way. One of the educational tools Israel has is their army, which was modeled, by the way, after the Cantonists' education in the army, which was a religious education and a communist education. The Zionists have the army, just as the Cantonists was for the Russification, right? It was the Russification of the recruits. Israel has a Zionist education in their army, which is why, by the way, the Haredim refuse to go to the Zionist army, and they say we'd rather die than be drafted. Don't believe the Zionists when they say we don't want to serve our country. It's not true. That's not true. Has nothing to do with it. They would not. We had a draft in the United States. I wasn't old enough then to be drafted, but I was a teenager and had friends who were drafted. If you're drafted, you get an exemption, but nobody, or you go. But nobody, no Orthodox Jews were protesting, we'd rather die than go to the army in America. It's only in Israel because Israel's army is a tool, is a indoctrination camp for Zionism. Israel's army is a church of Zionism. Between the educational institutions and the propaganda and the Zionist army, it's a brainwashing. And there are three things Zionists use to convince people to be Zionists. I have a chapter about it in my book. The bought, the bullied, and the brainwashed. They provide money. They bully people. If you say a word against Zionism, they will ruin your life. And the brainwashed. That's what it is. It's the same as, listen, Israelis convince a lot of people of a lot of things of their cause. But that's how they do it. And we, Orthodox Jews, again, we're not a proselytizing religion. We don't have, the public school kids are not going to our schools. By the way, Holocaust studies, here's how you want to know how they do it? Here's another example of their propaganda. Holocaust studies. Now, Holocaust studies sounds like a wonderful thing. Remember the Holocaust, there's lessons, genocide, terrible thing, the Holocaust. The problem with Holocaust studies is that the last chapter in all the Holocaust studies books and curriculums is Israel. That there was a Holocaust, and now we have Israel to ensure that there's not going to be another Holocaust. Kids go visit Auschwitz, the concentration camp, to learn the history. That's one thing. But they come out with Israeli flags draped over their shoulders. Because now we have Israel, and it's a binary choice, either Israel or Holocaust. And this is taught in public schools, not in Orthodox Jewish schools. They do not have Holocaust studies. And if they do, it's not with this curriculum. For the most part, they don't. And those that do not have this curriculum. But in the public schools, in Jewish day schools, where non-religious kids go, to the world, and Zionists give money to support these textbooks and stuff like that, and curricula. This is what people study. The purpose of the state of Israel is to prevent another Holocaust, to prevent anti-Semitism, and who could be against that? And anti-Semites love it too, because anti-Semites also agree that, I'm talking about the right-wing anti-Semites, guys like Richard Spencer, who called himself a white Zionist, that every country should be an ethno-country. So America should be for the whites. Jews belong in Israel. So Zionists and anti-Semites have the same agenda, and they feed off each other. Jews belong in Israel. It's your homeland. Jews cannot exist anywhere else because of anti-Semitism. Guess what? The anti-Semites agree with that. So the Zionists, there are so many ways: buying, bullying, and brainwashing. That's how Zionists convince people of this.
Official propaganda or social media control shows little or does not show at all the other side of the struggle of religious Jews against Israel. More than 100,000 anti-Zionist Jews held what could be called a march in Monsey, New York State, with the slogan that Zionism is the antithesis of Judaism. Ben-Gurion, I quote him, stated that according to his definition, Jews are a religious group, and there are Jews who accept this definition. And there are Jews who have no such definitions. They are true Jews, and I am one of them. I do not need a definition. Zionists deliberately use the words Zionist, Jew, and Israeli interchangeably so that people who read or listen begin to think that Jews and Zionists are the same thing. And then the question arises from the perspective of these Jews that Zionism is against the Torah. It is against them, the real Jews. There is an idea or an opinion that Zionism is a project of social engineering imposed on Jews so that people, including Jews themselves, begin to deny their true identity. Please tell us, what are Jews doing in the process of trying to reclaim their true history, to restore what was taken from it, and what are they doing in order to save, so to speak, this road, this long road of returning home to themselves, to their homeland? I will explain below what I mean by homeland.
Okay, so when you ask what the Jews are doing to reclaim it, we don't need to reclaim it because nobody took it from us. There are various different religions on this planet that claim to be the fulfillment of Judaism. Christianity believes themselves to be the fulfillment, at least certain Christians do, the fulfillment of Judaism. That Jesus is really the fulfillment of Judaism. You can ask me, what do we Jews plan on doing to reclaim our religion from the Christians? The Christians have their religion and we have ours. They are Jews for Jesus. There is Zionism. Zionism is another religion. What we do is what we've always done. We've taught our people and our children and our children's children what Judaism is. We produce scholarly works. We are not going to change our life's mission because there are some heretics, Zionists, starting non-religious Zionists who claim to be the Jews. There's nothing I can do. If somebody wants to claim to be the Jews, it's a free country. It's a free world. They can claim to be the Jews. The Black Hebrews claim to be the real Jews. The Zionists have just been more successful. What I personally have done is I wrote a book. It's called The Empty Wagon, Zionism's Journey from Identity Crisis to Identity Theft. You can get it online. It's a 1,400-page book explaining from beginning to the end how Zionism is not Judaism. What I'm doing is I'm on this show, for example, on this podcast, explaining to people about it. But here's the rule. You can only do what you can control. If a group of people come up with a lot of money and a lot of power and an actual country teaching people that this is Judaism, our job is to teach people that Judaism is something else. The most important people to teach that Judaism something else is the Jews. And we're doing that. We just don't have the resources that the Zionists do. We don't have the power that the Zionists do. And even if we did have the power and the resources, we would never exercise our power and our resources in the nefarious ways that Zionists do. The threats, the bullying, we do what we can. But the idea of reclaiming Judaism is a mistake because that implies that, okay, Judaism was stolen and now we have to reclaim it. Judaism was not stolen. A large deviant religion, a break-off of Judaism, there were many throughout history, exists now and is running around telling the world that they're the real Jews. We do what we can. But it's not like they did anything to Judaism. When the Christians claim that they are the fulfillment of Judaism, they didn't do anything to Judaism. They did something to themselves. They broke off from my religion and created another one. The Zionists did nothing to Judaism. They broke off from my religion and created another one. It's extremely important for people to understand. People say, I see it all over, that the Zionists changed Judaism or the Zionists ruined Judaism. They did not. They could ruin the reputation of Judaism, just as if somebody steals my identity, commits crimes with my identity, he could ruin my reputation, but that's only in the eyes of the viewers. I have self-confidence that I am still me, and I have self-confidence, and we Jews, Orthodox Jews, and other Jews also even, have self-confidence. We are not, the Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism is a doctrine, it's a religion. Zionists cannot change Judaism. They can reinterpret it, just like the Christians did, just like the Reform Jews did, just like conservative Jews did, just like the Tzedukim did, just like the Karoyim did, and now you have a group called Zionists. Just as the evangelicals, if you ask a Catholic, cannot harm Christianity. They could violate Christianity. They could break off from Christianity. That's what Protestant means, people who protest. Now, I'm not siding with the Catholics necessarily. Again, I'm not taking sides here simply because I'm ignorant of who's right and who's wrong. The evangelicals will say the same thing about the Catholics, but Christianity is what it is. Judaism is what it is. Different people can have different break-off groups, but the idea that Zionism did something to Judaism, the religion, Judaism, the ideology, that only is true, it can only be true if you presuppose that the Zionists represent the Jews, and Israel is indeed the state of the Jewish people. It's not. They're frauds. They're identity theft. They cannot do anything to Judaism. Judaism is doctrine. It remains untouched. It's like saying quack doctors. Witch doctors, let's say there would be a big movement of witch doctors, and you would ask a real doctor, what are you going to do to reclaim medicine? Well, you could try to expose the witch doctors, but witch doctors cannot harm the field of medicine. They cannot harm the facts. Judaism is a doctrine. What it is a fact. You could have witch doctors. Zionists are to Judaism what witch doctors are to medicine. And as far as homeland is concerned, what is a homeland? What does it mean? Well, in English, the word homeland doesn't really say much about what it means. In other languages, it does. There's la patrie in Spanish and Italian, or French, la patrie or la patria, Italian, Spanish, and French. There is Mother Russia. I forgot how to say it. I once knew that. Matushka Russia, something like that. There's Mother Russia. And in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, they call their homeland Moledes. It means birthplace. In nationalist philosophy, it is believed that there is an organic connection between a people and the land in which the people were born, the land that birthed the people, the fatherland, the motherland, the birthplace. And indeed, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, it says, here the Jewish people were born. And remember what I mentioned before, that Jewish history for the Zionists starts with Joshua? That's because the Jews were born, they were created, they became a people in the Holy Land. That's Zionist ideology. According to Jewish ideology, according to Jewish religion, the Jews became a people when God gave the Torah to the Jews at Mount Sinai. When Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai in the desert, where they had no country, they had no state, that's where the Jews became a people. We became a people because of the Torah. It is the religion that makes us united. And when we say people, it doesn't mean a national people in that sense. It means a religious community. We are an Ummah, the Ummah Yisraelis. The Muslims have a similar word, Ummah. we are a people because of the Torah. To Zionism, we are a people because of the land. And Israel is not a homeland in that sense. Israel is a holy land. And when I say Israel, I don't mean the state of Israel that was created in 1948. I mean the holy land of the Jews, whether it is under the sovereignty of the Ottomans or the British or the Romans or the Mamluks, it makes no difference. Jerusalem is equally Jerusalem, whether it's under the Romans or the Greeks or the Turks or the Zionists. The Zionists are just, pardon the expression, they're the new Turks. That's all they are. To us, Zionist sovereignty over the Holy Land is no different than Turkish sovereignty over the Holy Land. And just as the Holy Land was nothing more than a Holy Land when the Turks owned it, and Jews did not run around with Turkish flags, with Ottoman flags, when the Ottomans had the Holy Land, Jews, good Jews, do not run around with Israeli flags because the Zionists now own it. The flag, the sovereignty has nothing to do with it. It's a holy land. It's a place where God is close to. That's all it is. It's not a homeland. The Zionists changed that.
We have our final two questions. I promise I won't trouble the rabbi any further. The first and final question is connected to what we discussed earlier about the concept of homeland. I am referring to an issue related to Israel's constitutional foundation. The Declaration of Independence of Israel contains many contradictions with authentic Judaism. For example, the text of the declaration states, I quote, "Eretz Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people. In the understanding of observant Jews, the homeland of the Jewish people was Mount Sinai in the desert, which demonstrates that Jewish statehood does not depend on land." The next point in the declaration states, again, I quote, "After being forcibly exiled from their land, the people remained faithful to it throughout their dispersion and never ceased to pray and hope for their return to it and for the restoration of their political freedom." From the perspective of religious Jewish leaders, throughout the exile, Jews prayed and continue to pray for the Messiah, not for political independence during exile, which is essentially forbidden. Every subsequent line of Israel's Declaration of Independence is misleading and contradicts religious truth, yet deception is what drives Zionism. Judaism is a religion, while Israel is a political entity created in 1948 by people who knew nothing at all. Organizations such as AIPAC and the ADL deliberately equate Jews with Israel and with a foreign political entity. They all share an ugly tendency to tie all Jews to Israel's political actions. The safety of observant Jews and all innocent people in the Holy Land is of paramount importance. Religious Jews state that they have no nationalist plans in Israel. The Central Rabbinical Congress, uniting more than 300 rabbis, issued a condemnation of those who politicize anti-Semitism. Please tell us, why was a political homeland, Israel, invented for Jews, so that Jews would never actually return there?
Excellent question. What was motivating the Zionists to create Zionism? The answer is, and the Zionists wrote this in their own books, there was anti-Semitism. In 1881 in Russia, this was the turning point. There was a succession of lethal pogroms against the Jews. What was unique about that particular time period that's why Zionism was born then, was that the Zionists always believed that the Jews are disgusting. Well, a lot of Jews believed that in order to alleviate anti-Semitism, you have to alleviate Judaism. There were many Jews, there are many Jews who became secular, and they were able to do this in the Enlightenment and the Emancipation. For many centuries, Jews were relegated to ghettos in Europe. But after a certain point, the emancipation, the Enlightenment came, and there were Jews who had freedom not only of religion, but freedom from religion. They said that the reason they believed, the reason the Jews are persecuted is because they're disgusting and ugly, and they absorbed the anti-Semitic tropes of the anti-Semites. So they figured if we drop the religion and we become totally assimilated, we become as German as the Christian Germans, as Russian as the Christian Russians, then nobody will bother us. And so they did. There were many non-religious Jews, assimilated Jews. But the problem was it didn't work. Even though they were assimilated, even though they were no more Jewish than the Russian non-Jewish Jews, the Russian anti-Semites attacked them as well. There were a succession of, starting 1881, pogroms that confused the secular assimilated Jews. They said to themselves, hey, I don't understand. Why are they attacking us? We're not really Jewish. We're not any more Jewish than the average Russian. We're not any more Jewish than the average German. Why are they attacking us? And they had an identity crisis. They hated Judaism. They hated the Jewish people. And they didn't want to be Jews. But the non-Jews would not let them be non-Jews either. The non-Jews told them they are Jews, whether they like it or not. And that led to an identity crisis. There were many solutions that they were thinking of. Communism was one of them, and Karl Marx, Moses Hess, who was kind of a mentor of Karl Marx, he was one of the first Zionists. He was a socialist or communist, forget about the difference for now. They believed that, well, if you believe in communism, that means everyone's treated equally and the Jews will be treated equal. Some of them said Bolshevism is the answer. There are various different answers. And in that time period, when religion in general was not mandatory anymore, there were a lot of isms that were created. Nationalism was one of them. Nationalism said, especially organic nationalism, ethnic nationalism, that in people are not individuals, they're organically tied to a group that's called the nation. And the Jews, the problem is, this was the Zionist idea, that the Jews need to adopt nationalism, will become a nationality. And the reason why anti-Semites still hate us is because they still perceive the Jews as being connected to those religious Jews, those disgusting Jews, those ruthless Jews. Really, what we're going to be, we're going to make ourselves into a nation. Then what's going to happen is, this was the Zionists, the Jews are going to change their personalities. They're going to change their personalities from people who don't want wars, who don't celebrate wars, to people who love strong armies, like nationalities do. Religions aspire to being a holy people, being a pious people. This is what the Jews wanted. Study the Torah, pray to God, be a religious people. But nationalities, countries, have a whole bunch of different aspirations. To be a success, not only a success, to be a proud country, what does it mean? You have a strong army, you win Olympic gold medals, you win Eurovision song contests, you invent apps, everybody respects you for your strength. Nobody respected Jews for their strength while they were still a religion. Nobody respected Jews. Where was the Jewish architecture? Where was the Jewish science when Jews were only a religious group? Because that wasn't our job. We lived a monastic life. We lived a life of priests. It's fine to have sports and armies, and if you're not Jews, but Jews are tasked with spending their life on their religion. No, the Jews are going to want to have a strong army. They're going to want to be like everybody else. All the Jews, when somebody looks at a Jew, They're going to look at the Jew as a national, and they're going to respect the Jews because the Jews are going to be strong. And that's what we're going to do. That's what the Zionists did. So in order to, they looked at anti-Semitism as a symptom of something wrong in the Jews. And they said if the Jews transform into a nationality, they weren't the only ones transforming into nationality. Nationalism was big in those days. If we adopt Jewish nationalism, then everyone's going to respect the Jews because the Jews will have a land, their own language, their own culture, their own army. And everybody's going to see the Jews are strong. We're going to be strong Jews. That's why the Zionists always try to tell people they're strong and why they refuse to negotiate like other people do. They refuse to see. In order to understand the Zionist personality, you need to understand that Zionism was an overcorrection, an overcompensation for what they perceived wrongly. They perceived in their anti-Semitic, self-hating perception of what Jews were as disgusting because they were weak, because they didn't want armies, because they didn't want strength. They were looking for godly values, for saintly values, rather than for priestly values, rather than national values. We're going to change that. We're going to be an army, and anybody that tries to mess with us, we're going to bomb them. Anybody that tries to harm us, we're going to kill them. And then they're going to respect the Jews. That's what they said. We're going to be respected when we're strong. The nation, the reason why the anti-Semites don't respect Jews is because they don't have an army. They're not strong. They don't stick up for themselves. They're pacifists. We're going to do just the opposite. We're going to stick up for ourselves more than the non-Jews do. We're going to have an army and stronger, and we're going to be tougher and rougher than anybody. We're going to be the tough Jews, the rough Jews, and everybody's going to see. The Jews themselves are going to see, oh, what wonderful Jews. We're going to evolve the Jews into having a certain character. We're going to give the Jews a flag. Jews never had a flag. We're going to give the Jews a national anthem. Jews never had a national anthem. We're going to give the Jews a national language, modern Hebrew. For thousands of years, Jews didn't speak Hebrew, and Jews spoke various different languages. The Eastern European Jews spoke Yiddish, the Spanish Jews spoke Ladino, the Arabic Jews spoke Arabic. No, we're going to have a Jewish language. The Jews will be proud. Jews previously, they were proud of serving God, praying well, serving God well, studying well. That's what makes the Jews hated so much. The Jews will suddenly be proud of and therefore aspire to being strong and having an army and having the best weapons and the best Olympic team and the best songs and the best apps and the best civilization and the most advanced, powerful, strong country. And then everybody's going to respect the Jews. Theodor Herzl, on the last page, the climax of his book, The Jewish State, he wrote that as soon as Zionism gets off the ground and people see what the Jews' aspirations are, anti-Semitism will disappear off the earth. Because the reason why anti-Semites hate Jews, because they're all like Yakov Shapiro. When Jews become more like Benjamin Netanyahu, then everybody will love them. How's that working out for you guys, you Zionists? Right, not working out, but that's what they thought. Other Zionists said, Leo Pinsker, when the Jews acquire a state for themselves, then anti-Semitism will disappear. And they said that when the Jews become strong and they become tough and they become rough, people will respect them. So that's why they wanted home. And in order to do that, they needed two things. They needed, on one hand, to change the Jews, but on the other hand, they needed to recruit the Jews into this movement. They needed to change the Jews, but the problem they had was the Jews already had ideology and a religion. So here's what the Zionists did. They took concepts, symbols, and ideas that are holy to the Jews. The Holy Land. Why did they take Palestine, the Zionists? Why couldn't they take Uganda, which was an option, or Argentina, which was an option? In fact, there were religious Zionist Jews, by the way, who, when the vote came regarding what land to target for the Jewish state, the religious ones wanted Uganda / Kenya, because they said, all we want is a safe place. We're not interested in any identity changes. We're not interested in any transformation of the Jews. All we want is a safe place. But Theodor Herzl and the secular Zionists, the Zionists that are not religious, the Zionists that don't care about anything holy, the Zionists that don't care about the Bible, the Zionists that don't believe in the Jewish religion or the Bible, said, no, we need Palestine, we need the Holy Land in order to recruit the Jews. We're going to tell the Jews, be proud Jews, but we're just going to slightly change what it means to be a Jew. Be proud Jews, be good Jews. Don't let anybody harm the Jews. And all of this are good slogans. But what they did was they changed it a little. You know, the Jews always said, one of the things you surely heard was, the Jews always say, next year in Jerusalem. We say it at the Passover Seder, we say it other times too. But what that means in context is that after the Passover Seder, where we discuss animal sacrifices and the story of the Exodus from Egypt, we say that next year, after the Messiah, we hope the Messiah will come. We want the Messiah to come. The world will be transformed. The Zionists won't be around anymore, by the way, when the Messiah comes, because only those people that believe and are willing to accept Judaism, the religion, will be around then, because that's the end of days. People get the reward for being Jewish, or if you're a non-Jew, you get reward for following the 7 Noahide laws. But people who will fight against God, God will reveal himself, and everybody will see the truth of the Jewish religion, and then everybody will have a chance to get their reward. And we want that. And then we'll have animal sacrifices again. But it has nothing to do with national self-determination. It's a spiritual renewing of the world. But the Zionists changed that, and they said, we're going to come to Jerusalem next year as self-determination. Israel Zangwill, one of the early Zionists, you can call him one of the founding fathers of Zionism, or one of the early theoreticians of Zionism. He said, I don't understand. He said, the Jews were saying next year in Jerusalem for thousands of years, and now I'm telling you, we're going to bring you back to Jerusalem, and you call me, the religious Jews call me a heretic? Well, the answer is yes, because that's not what next year in Jerusalem ever meant. So the Zionists needed to, they believed that they needed to change the Jews into a nationality from a religion, because that will transform the personality of Jews from people like me to people like Netanyahu, to people like Ariel Sharon. And that will make people respect the Jews. And that will fix the Jews. It will cleanse the Jews. It will evolve the Jews into being normal people, normal like the Cossacks, normal like the Aryans, normal like the anti-Semites. That's what they wanted. They admired the Cossacks. They admired the anti-Semites. They admired these strong men. And they said, this is what the Jews need to become. And when we become that, everybody will respect us. And they thought that people like me, the Haredim, would not exist anymore, because everybody would say, I also want to be a Zionist. Please, Zionist. Netanyahu, teach me how to be like you. Sharon, teach me how to be like you. Ben Gvir and Smotrich did that. They basically said, we love what the secular Zionists have to offer. Please, we want to be like that. So they incorporated a level of religious rituals. They eat kosher, the guys wear yarmulkes like me, but the ideology and the definition of Jew, they accepted that too. And they are idol worshipers that have a religion that has overlap with me, you know, but they're also idol worshipers. And that's why the Zionists did this, because they thought it would improve the Jews' personality, which was disgusting. And now everyone's going to love the Jews. Vladimir Jabotinsky, at a eulogy for Theodor Herzl, he said that Herzl was a real Zionist. And if you want to know what a real Zionist is, and this was in 1904, he said this. He said that a Zionist, I can't really give you a picture of a Zionist, but what I can do is I can give you a picture of the opposite of a Zionist. And you take that picture and you imagine its diametrical opposite. The opposite of a Zionist is a Jid. That's what he said. A Yid, a Yid, a Jew. Take a Yid, and every single personality trait of that Yid, imagine its exact opposite. Every little trait, every character trait that Yid has, take it and imagine its exact opposite. That's a Zionist. A Yid is ugly, a Zionist is handsome. A Yid is scared, a Zionist is courageous. A Yid is weak, a Zionist is strong. A Yid is ashamed, a Zionist goes to the world and looks them in the eye and says, I am a Zionist. A Yid is disgusting. A Zionist is charming. The goal of Zionism was to create a personality, was to change the personalities of the Jews from Yid to Netanyahu, from Yid to Herzl, from Yid to Jabotinsky. I want to be a Yid. Netanyahu wants to be Jabotinsky. Netanyahu's father was actually a big student of Jabotinsky. I want to be me. I want to be a Yid. The ultra-Orthodox Jews, we want to be Yids. The Zionists want to be Jabotinsky and to be the opposite of us. That's the goal of Zionism.
Final question. Please explain one detail to me. Herzl distorted the true meaning of the word Jew, which made the understanding of this complex designation difficult for subsequent generations. Rabbi Saadia Gaon stated, "We are a nation only through the Torah." In the Holy Torah, given at Mount Sinai, it says, I quote, "This day you have become a people to the Lord your God." Deuteronomy 27:9. The Gemara in Hulin 1:11 says, "The Tuzanai were not called the children of Israel." Please tell us, is this a change, a substitution, or what does this actually mean?
Saadia Gaon, who was a Jewish rabbi, one of the leading Jewish rabbis, maybe the leading Jewish rabbi, about 1,000 years ago, he lived in Egypt. He said, like all the Jews do, that our people are only a people because of our Torah. In context, he was talking about other religions that believe that God took the law from the Jews and gave it to another people. He was saying that those religions are wrong because he has verses from the Bible that he quotes that say that the Jewish people will be around forever. And he says that if God would take the Torah away from the Jews and give it to somebody else, the Jews would no longer exist, because the definition of a Jew is one of the people who have the Torah. That's all it means. There is nothing else, that there is no other meaning to Jew except the people who have the Torah. If you don't believe that there's such a thing as the Torah, that God gave Moses the Torah on Mount Sinai, then you don't believe that the Jewish people exist. And there's no difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. It's very simple. Herzl, the Zionists, all of these people, yes, they changed that. They said that it is not the Torah that defines a Jew, but it is land, language, and culture defines a Jew. The same thing that defines a Russian. You speak Russian, you have Russian culture, you sing Russian songs, whatever the Russian songs are. I only know Volga Boatman. Whatever the Russian songs are, whatever the Russian national anthem is, the Russian land, Mother Russia, the Jews, what makes Jews Jews is the same thing. Now, an important thing here that I need to explain. Many people, when you ask what the definition of a Jew is, or you discuss it, they look at it in the wrong way. They start off by thinking, okay, there's a group of people, they're Jews. I know who the Jews are. I can see them. I know what they are. I see them. Let me try to define them. In the same way, there's two ways to define something. You could say, let's say there's a word you don't know the definition of. I don't know the definition of, anti-disestablishmentarianism. So you look up the definition and you have no idea what the word is. Then there are other ways to seek a definition. There are other times where you know what the thing is that you're trying to define. you know there's such a thing as love. Now let's try to define it. You know there's such a thing as hate. And now let's try to define it. And you may say something like, I don't know what love is, or I don't know what hate is, but I know it when I feel it. When we say what the definition of a Jew is, people tend to look at it in that second way. They say, I see the Jews, let's define them. Let's try to find a common denominator. That's not going to work because there will not be any common denominator. What you need to do, what the Jews always did, is start from scratch. What is a Jew? Throughout history, how did the Jews identify themselves? How did they define Jew? The definition of a Jew is somebody who is obligated by the Torah to fulfill God's commandments. Now, if you look at Jews, you won't necessarily see that. What you will see is that there are a bunch of people, some identify as ethnic Jews, whatever that means. It doesn't make sense because the ethnic Jews from Russia or from Eastern Europe or from Germany are not, certainly not of the same ethnicity as Ethiopian Jews or Yemenite Jews. And yet, in their world, the world, let's say, of the non-religious Eastern European Jews, they identify themselves as ethnic Jews. They have certain Jewish food. They have certain Jewish, maybe, sense of humor. They had even Pale of Settlements. The Jews spoke Yiddish. They had kind of their own language, and they had their own place in the Pale of Settlement. So they kind of felt like they're their own ethnicity. But that doesn't explain what a Jew is, because what these people aren't being cognizant of when they define themselves that way is that there are also Jews in Ethiopia at the same time that also identify themselves as Jews, who don't speak Yiddish, who don't live in the Pale of Settlement, who don't eat your food, who don't have your culture, who don't read your newspapers. And yet, in order to define Jew, you need to find a common denominator between the Russian Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, the Yemenites Jews, the German Jews, the Syrian Jews. And you need to find one common denominator that makes them all Jews. Somebody even once told me that he'll concede that Jews are comprised of many different ethnicities. But I told him that's not a good enough definition, because the question remains, what is there between these particular ethnicities that put them in the same category, Jew? You need to find, this is what we're in search of. We can't look at a bunch of Jews that we're familiar with and say, let me try to describe their Jewishness in the same way you feel love and you say, let me try to describe what I'm feeling. Instead, what you need to do is use rational logic here. The fact is that there are Jews all over the world, different cultures, different countries. Some are even not religious. Some are religious. Some practice Christianity. They're Jews who converted to Christianity. You need a definition that includes all those Jews. Or, I mean, if you want to define a Jew as somebody who eats gefilte fish, then you're taking the Moroccan Jews out of the equation. No problem. But you need a definition that you are willing to commit yourself to, that a characteristic or characteristics, that whoever has this characteristic is a Jew, and whoever is a Jew has this characteristic. And whoever does not have this characteristic is not a Jew. The only intellectually sustainable definition that anybody has ever come up with that can define, that can fulfill that requirement of a definition is anybody who is obligated to fulfill the 613 commandments, whether he believes he's obligated or not, whether he thinks he's obligated or not, whether he is compliant with those commandments or not. That's the definition of a Jew. And I am fully willing to say that this definition is dependent upon the religion. The religion decides, the religion of Judaism, the Torah, the Talmud decides who is obligated to fulfill those 613 commandments. If the Talmud says you're obligated, I say you're a Jew. If the Talmud says you're not obligated, then I say you're not a Jew. For example, there are many people that'll tell you, well, the definition of a Jew is someone who has a Jewish mother. Now, that makes no sense. First of all, you can't say that, you can't use the word that you're defining in the definition. So in other words, if I ask you what a dog is, you can't say, well, yes, if the mother dog and the father dog were a dog, then their offspring is a dog. That doesn't tell you what a dog is. And when you say, well, if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, that doesn't tell you what a Jew is. Aside from that, why is it that Judaism is handed down through the mother and not the father? Ethnicities don't work that way. Races don't work that way. Nationalities don't work that way. Not only that, in Jewish law, tribalism doesn't work that way. The Jews had 12 tribes. If your tribe, if the father is from one tribe and the mother is from another tribe, the offspring's tribe is the tribe of the father. Inheritance doesn't work that way. Family relations doesn't work that way. In the Bible, it says, "L'mishpachoisam lebeis avoisam," or "lebeis avoisam l'mishpachoisam." Families follow paternal lineage. The father is the one that determines family association. Why is it that regarding Judaism, regarding whether you're Jewish or not, it follows the mother? You know what the answer is? The answer is because the Talmud derives it from a verse in the Bible, because the Torah says so. The Torah says, without giving a reason, the Torah says, just like the Torah says, I'm not allowed to eat a camel. I don't ask why. That's what it says in the Torah. Just as the Torah says, I'm obligated to put on tefillin every day. I don't ask why. The Torah says that if your mother is obligated to fulfill 613 commandments, you are too. If your mother is not, you are not. It is religious doctrine. It is impossible to accept the idea that if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish, if you don't accept the religion. Then why would you say that if your mother's Jewish, you're Jewish? There is no way to define being a Jew unless you invoke the religious laws. If you don't believe in the religious laws, you will not find a logical, intellectually coherent, and consistent definition of Jew.
We have a tradition. When our guests come to us, at the end of the broadcast, they share their wishes, recommendations, or at least what they would like to say to our audience. As a kind of roadmap, I would like to quote Rabbi Silverstein, the patriarch of a well-known Satmar family and a personal student of the great Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Teitelbaum. I quote, "We want to live in peace with our Muslim neighbors. The state of Israel does not represent the interests of Jews." What would you like to say to our viewers, listeners, and readers?
Silverstein said is true. We want to live in peace with anybody. We have no, our enemies, my enemy is my evil inclination. My enemy is the part of me, the part of everybody that wants to do sins. There is an evil inclination in a person and a good inclination. Everybody is made out of all human beings have an urge to do bad and a desire, a conscious desire to do good. Our job in this world is to do good and not do bad. Ezehu Gibor, our sages say, who is strong? HaKoivish es Yitzroi, he who conquers his urge to do bad, his urge to sin. My urge to sin is my only enemy. The enemies of God, the forces of sin in this world, those are my enemies. My only enemy is sin. I have no enemies. The Muslims are not my enemies. The Christians are not my enemies. I want to live in peace with them. I disagree with their religion and they disagree with mine. That's the way it is. No problem. Jews want to live in peace with everybody. If somebody doesn't, then he's not being a good Jew. And if he, as a matter of policy, thinks that certain nationalities or religions are his enemies in the sense that he needs to fight them, physically fight them, then he's a Zionist. He's a Zionist. We do not wage war. We are not permitted to wage war against anybody, nor do we have any desire to wage war against anybody. If you try to force me to violate my religion, then I will physically fight you. But if you are just have a different religion or a different ideology than me, we want to live in peace. Very simple. That's all I want. Here's the bottom line. Israel is a foreign country. Again, I'm an American. My family's from Poland. My wife is an American. Her family was from Brest-Litovsk. All we want is in peace in my home, while to take a walk along the bay, study my Torah, pray my prayers, spend time with my family, pay my taxes, and that's it. Live a normal American Jewish religious life. Is it too much to ask that a foreign country, Israel, stay out of my life? Is it too much to ask that a foreign country leave me alone, stop talking about me, stop saying you represent me? And I'm asking all the people out there to understand that that's all Jews want. Zionists, go have a Zionist on the show if you want and let him talk about Zionism. But as far as Judaism is concerned and Jews, all we want is to be left alone, to study our Torah, to pray our prayers, to live our lives, and we have nothing to do with any foreign country. And if any foreign country says that they have a connection with us, it's a unilateral statement. They are deluded. It's wrong, and I disavow that. I contradict that. I oppose that, and I condemn that in the strongest terms possible.
Thank you very much, dear Rabbi, for spending 2 hours with us today and an hour last time. I am truly grateful to you for your valuable knowledge and for the time you devoted to our audience, and to me personally. I believe that your knowledge and information, which strongly contradict official propaganda, will bring clarity to people's minds and help draw a clear distinction between Jews and Zionism. Thank you.
Thank you.